Despite the success of this year's election in Nigeria, according to one NGO, progress in good governance is still stalling in Africa. 3 scientists will share the 2015 Nobel Prize for Medicine for work on parasitic diseases and finding the perfect match with halal speed dating. Africa 54 starts right now.
Good evening and welcome. I'm Vincent Makori. This is Africa 54. Now, Doctors Without Borders say the U.S. strike on a hospital in Kunduz that was meant to hit Taliban targets was a war crime. Now, some experts, however, dispute that characterization. The top U.S. general in Afghanistan, John Campbell, has ordered an investigation into the incident and says preliminary results should be available in the next couple of days. A Pentagon correspondent Carla Babb has their latest.
Destruction in the unlikeliest of places. A hospital, a place those injured in war had sought out as a refuge. The group Doctors Without Borders says the strike killed 22, including hospital staff and children. The top U.S. general in Afghanistan told reporters the Afghan military called for the airstrike against Taliban fighters in the area.
The Afghan forces called in for fire to support them because they were under direct fire.
General Campbell said U.S. forces are in Kunduz advising Afghan forces, but earlier reports that U.S. forces there were taking fire from the Taliban were inaccurate. Doctors Without Borders has issued a statement saying, "The reality is the U.S. dropped those bombs. The U.S. military remains responsible for the targets it hits, and there can be no justification for this horrible attack."
If errors were committed, we will acknowledge them. We'll hold those responsible accountable, and we will take steps to ensure mistakes are not repeated.
In the fog of war, analysts say tragedies like this one cannot be prevented, no matter how cautious the U.S. may be.
When you have seconds or minutes in which to react, when you're getting confusing messages from very different echelons of command, when you can't wait for some ideal rules of engagement to be met, you're going to have these incidents.
In a statement sent to VOA, the Taliban denied the presence of its fighters in the hospital at the time of the strike. The U.S. has criticized the Taliban for staying and fighting from within the city, which General Campbell says is, quote, knowingly putting civilians at significant risk.
Now, VOA's Carla Babb joins us live via Skype from the Pentagon. Hello, Carla.
Hi, Vincent. And I was just watching General Campbell as he was speaking to the Senate Armed Services Committee, and he stressed to the Senate that the United States would never and did not intentionally and deliberately strike a protected medical facility.
Now, in your package, actually, I picked out one line. The general says, if a mistake was made, if somebody did something wrong, they will be held responsible. What does that mean? Is that comforting to people like the MSF?
Well, MSF is calling this a war crime. And if an entity does deliberately target a hospital during war, that is considered a war crime. However, the United States and people in the halls of the Pentagon that I've been speaking with today say that that is not the case, that that was not a deliberate target. But now that leaves a lot of questions. You look at if it wasn't deliberately targeted, then how could the United States not have known that it was a hospital? The Doctors Without Borders camp says that they told the Afghans, they told the NATO forces, and they told the Taliban where they were, so they don't know how this could occur. Then you look at, did the United States and did the Afghans know that there were still people using this facility? Because a lot of the area around Kunduz was evacuated when the Taliban came in. So there are a lot of questions that need to be answered by this investigation.
Indeed, many questions with all those kind of confusing messages there. But what is the current situation in Kunduz right now?
Well, the current situation is that the Afghan forces have retaken the majority of the city. There are pockets of Taliban insurgents still within the city, but basically what happened is the Taliban took the Afghan forces by surprise, and there were some Afghan units that were outside the city that were not able to get in there in time. But General Campbell said today in the Senate Armed Services Committee that once they were able to regroup, they were able to push the Taliban out.
Now, we know that the U.S. military in Afghanistan were supposed to leave, the soldiers were supposed to leave by the end of 2016. Does the general think this will still happen?
Well, he actually said quite the opposite. He said that he had recommended to his superiors that there would be options for force protection after 2016. He says that there has been a lot that has changed in Afghanistan since the last getting out by 2016 decision was made. He said that there's been the situation with the Islamic State, and there have been a lot of different developments that would prevent the United States forces from leaving. They said that the unity government wants the United States to stay, and if the United States and the coalition were to go, then all of the counterterrorism, a lot of the different training exercises that they need and that the Afghans have wanted would be severely diminished. One of the biggest points, and we're saying this during an airstrike, the United States says that the Afghans need a lot more support in their air support. They started way too late, General Campbell said. The United States and NATO started way too late building up those forces, and that they shouldn't leave early. They need to make sure that they're protected and that they're available and able and capable to do this before the United States leaves.
Well, Carla, thank you very much for your reporting.
Thank you.
VOA's Calabab reporting live from the Pentagon. Now, Nigerians celebrated 35 years of independence in style last week, but that is not the only celebration going on in the country. The most populous African country is also celebrating a successful historic election. Africa 54's Esther Githo-Yuwat is here to tell us more. Esther?
That's right, Vincent. Nigeria's 2015 election has been hailed as historic and successful. The International Foundation of Electoral Systems, IFES, conducted a post-election survey in the country in which over 73% of voters said the elections were free and fair. Former chairman of the Independent National Electoral Commission, Chairman Professor Atahiru Jega, spoke extensively about the commission's work in a panel discussion held at the U.S. Senate building. IFES invited Professor Jega to Capitol Hill to share his insights into this year's election that led to the first democratic transfer of power in Nigeria's history. I sat down with Professor Jega and asked him what strategies INEC employed under his leadership to reach this magnitude of success.
In Nigeria, we did a strategic plan covering the period 2012 to 2016, and it helped us first to do good elections in 2015, but it has also helped us, we believe, to reposition the Electoral Commission to make it one of the best in terms of efficiency and effectiveness in the world.
He says the new commission faced enormous challenges and needed to understand how things were done in the past to plan a successful election.
And I must say that the lessons we learned through that exercise helped us a lot in terms of preparing not just for the 2011 elections, but most especially for the 2015 general elections.
However, the planning was not all smooth sailing. The election slated for February was postponed for 6 weeks as security chiefs issued warnings of imminent attacks from Boko Haram militants. The warning raised doubts among voters and suspicion against the incumbent government of President Goodluck Jonathan. Professor Jega says his commission consulted with stakeholders and security officials.
You know, in our own kind of environment, we also had to factor the consequences of disagreeing publicly with heads of security agencies. And we said, even if we thought we could do this election and we proceeded, what if bombs just start exploding everywhere to prove to the commission that you can't do it with, ignoring our advice? So we just decided that it wasn't worth the risk.
The discussion, moderated by Voice of America's Africa Division Director, Mr. Neguse Mengecha, also revealed that Nigerian politicians engaged in voter buying, even though the voters had been issued with permanent voter cards. IFES Senior Research, Evaluation and Learning Manager Rola Abdulatif said the cards made a difference in the overall integrity of the elections, a point echoed by Professor Jega.
Even though about 25% of the people said they accepted money and gifts, but they said overwhelmingly that they voted in accordance with their preferences, which meant that voters could take money and still vote the people that they really prefer.
Professor Jega, however, cautions politicians and voters alike against employing corrupt practices, saying it weakens the process of building a democratic society.
Now, in our next report, former INEX chairman, Professor Tahiru Jega, gives a piece of advice to Africa's electoral commissions on how to hold credible elections. Vincent?
Thanks, Esther. Now we want to know what you think about Africa 54 and the stories we cover. Join the conversation on Facebook. The address is Africa54. And check out our headlines 24/7 on voaafrica.com. Find me on Twitter at VOA Vince Makori. Well, coming up, the Nobel Committee honors pioneers in parasitic diseases. Stay with us.
This is Green Beat for a healthier planet.
With a face only a mother could love, this frog and thousands like it are helping farmers in Cambodia as natural pesticides. Basically, they eat the pest that can destroy rice crops.
I first chose to raise frogs on my farm here because in this area we have big problems with harmful insects which can destroy everything.
Rice farmer Rasmal has been raising frogs since 2006.
I used to spend a lot of money, firstly on fertilizer and secondly on expensive chemical sprays.
Mal's rice yields nearly doubled after he began using frogs to protect his crops against pests. The Cambodia Center for Study and Development of Agriculture promotes the use of frogs as a natural pesticide. But because of widespread frog hunting, most farmers won't raise them. Frogs are a popular and inexpensive food source in Cambodia, so some agriculture experts are urging restrictions on frog hunting during the growing season. I'm Rebecca Ward for VOA's Green Beat.
Welcome back. Now, some 100 migrants are believed to have died at sea off the coast of Libya. That's according to unconfirmed reports from the Libyan Red Crescent on Tuesday. The International Organization of Migration says more than 500,000 migrants and refugees have crossed the Mediterranean to Europe this year. Almost 3,000, including many Africans, have died making the attempt. IOM reported this week 2,000 new arrivals in Italy and over 20,000 in Greece. Now, the Greek ambassador to the U.S., Christos Panagopoulos, spoke with Africa 54's Alexis Christophorous about the challenges facing the new Greek government, including the refugee crisis.
Ambassador Panagopoulos, Europe's migrant crisis has hit Greece particularly hard. It's the first port of call for hundreds of thousands of refugees from war and persecution in the Middle East and elsewhere. How is Greece tackling this crisis in an efficient and humane way?
Let me give you the outline here. Greece is battered by the economic crisis for the last 6 years, lost 25% of its GDP. In the middle of this terrible economic crisis, we are called to face at the forefront one of the worst humanitarian crises on a global scale. But we are a migrant nation. We know what to do. We want to help. The thing is that the crisis, the refugee crisis, is of such a scale that, as everybody agrees, we need to join forces. One single nation is not possible to do with it. That's what we're trying to do, and as we speak, there is an extra-European summit in Brussels, trying to convince everybody participating in the European Union that we have to join forces. So we do our best. We have, I can tell you, so many moving stories of Greeks going out of their way to help these people that are coming at our shores. But at the same time, I have to tell you, from the beginning of the year, more than 250,000 people, they landed in a few islands in Greece, and it's simply not possible to cope with this.
Well, moving over to the economy now, which is the other big story for Greece. With the elections now behind you, does this mean Greece will have a respite from political upheaval for a while and be able to concentrate on getting its economic house in order?
If there's one single message of the elections of last Sunday, is that the clear-cut a message of political stability. Everybody agrees that it was a clear-cut message from the people of Greece, and there's no elections in the near future. Actually, to be correct, the next 3-4 years we are not going to face elections, being not the presidential, parliamentary or local elections. What does it mean? It's going to provide much needed political stability in order to try and stabilize the system, the first, the step number one, and then to deal with the economic crisis. We have already, as you know, an agreement with our lenders and partners, more than $90 billion US dollars. They're going to be available for Greece to meet our immediate, for the next 3 years at least, our immediate needs. At the same time, stabilize our banking system, and then do the reforms and regain the confidence, which is the magic word, because it's going to lead us to growth. And when we achieve growth, we're talking about normalization of the economy much easier.
Ambassador Christos Panagopoulos, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
Alexis, thank you very much.
Well, and that was Alexis Christophorous reporting. Well, joining us now is Africa 54 health correspondent Lenore Madu. What do you have for us today, Lenore?
It's all about the Nobel Peace Prize. Well, the Nobel Prize in Medicine this time, it has been jointly awarded this year to 3 scientists for their work on parasitic diseases.
The Nobel Assembly at the Karolinska Institute has today awarded the 2015 Nobel Prize in Physiology and Medicine, with 1/2 jointly to William C. Campbell and Satoshi Omura for their discoveries concerning a novel therapy against infections caused by roundworm parasites, and the other half to Yu Tu for her discoveries concerning a novel therapy against malaria.
Chinese scientist Tu Yu won half of the Nobel Prize for Medicine for discovering artemisinin, a drug that has significantly reduced the mortality rates for patients suffering from malaria. She and her colleagues obtained the pure substance in 1972 after extensive research. Despite progress in the past decade, malaria still kills around 500,000 people a year, most of them children under 5 in sub-Saharan Africa. Here in the United States, Irish-born William Campbell is thrilled. He won half of the prize along with Japan's Satoshi Omura for discovering ivermectin, a derivative which has been used to treat hundreds of millions of people with river blindness and lymphatic filariasis or elephantiasis.
I feel honored, but especially feel honored as a representative of all the people who worked on this together.
We've worked together as a team with one heart towards one goal. I've read so many books, and I've always developed my research by understanding the entire flow of things.
Some 3.4 billion people are at risk of contracting these 3 parasitic diseases, which are part of a group of neglected tropical diseases. Most victims live in poor countries.
Parasitic worms occur in domestic animals and people. The worms that live inside the body, they do a lot of harm, different kinds of harm caused by different kinds of worms, but they often cause serious disease, such as blindness, in the case of river blindness, and also death. And so there's a great need for drugs. And what happened with the drug ivermectin was that we discovered a drug that kills the worms indirectly by paralyzing them.
Observers say the treatment is so successful that river blindness and lymphatic filariasis are now on the verge of being eradicated. The Nobel Prize was founded with the wealth left by Swedish chemist Alfred Nobel, the inventor of dynamite. Since 1901, the prize has been awarded for outstanding contributions in physics, chemistry, physiology or medicine, literature, and for work in peace. Joining us for more on addressing neglected tropical diseases is Catherine Sanchez, Knowledge Manager of the End in Africa Project, a USAID-funded project that is managed by the organization FHI 360. Ms. Sanchez, welcome to the program.
Thank you.
First, let me have your reaction to the Nobel Prize of Medicine winners addressing parasitic diseases. How do you react to this, given that this is really important in your work?
Yes, it's very important, and we're very excited at our project at FHI 360 and in Africa. I think I could speak for the entire NTD community in saying how excited we are about this, because it brings really awareness to diseases that have been neglected for so long.
Absolutely, and they are called neglected tropical diseases for a reason. Now, tell us how you are experiencing this in your work. If they are neglected, how does this affect your work?
Yeah, they are neglected because basically they affect the poorest of the poor. And they affect children, especially. About 500 million children around the world have NTDs. And children and poor people don't tend to have a lot of political power, political voice. So therefore, their health priorities aren't always on the high list of priorities of countries, and particularly in the international community. Yeah. So we're very interested in having this awareness raised.
And NTDs is something that your organization is tackling in West Africa. Ivermectin, the drug that has been discovered by the winners, is part of the tools that you use to address these diseases. Tell us about that and some of the other tools that are available to do so.
Yeah, so the way we treat these diseases, or the way the countries treat the diseases, we support them, but the countries really are the leaders in this. They do a program called Mass Drug Administration, which is a drug delivery platform, and they use ivermectin and other medicines, and they give these to people in the communities, and they have to reach the entire population, really, of the communities that are at risk for the diseases in order for it to be effective. So we work with them to help them do that.
How available is this drug and other drugs? Are they expensive? Or, I mean, I guess expensive is relative, but how available are they?
We're actually very fortunate in that way, in that we have pharmaceutical companies like Merck and Pfizer and GlaxoSmithKline who donate the drugs. So the expense actually isn't generally part of the problem. But once the drugs are donated, they need to get to the communities. They need to get to the people who need them. So that's where the work comes in, and that's where the money is needed. Because to get to so many different people, millions and millions of people, you need a lot of funding. You need a lot of support and resources.
So how does the field look in terms of the eradication? Because in my report, I spoke about the fact that the drug is so effective that some of the diseases are said, at least those that the drug address, are in the verge of being eradicated. What can you tell us about that?
We've seen, actually, the countries have seen tremendous progress in this. Ghana, for example, has basically eliminated trachoma in its borders, and Togo also has eliminated pretty much lymphatic filariasis. So there's definitely progress being made. And in other countries also, they're seeing a lot of progress. But in some countries, there's still more work to be done. So we're making progress, but we have a ways to go.
So ways to go, what will it take for the final push?
Well, I should say also that there are some diseases that are targeted for elimination, and there are others like schistosomiasis and soil-transmitted helminths that are just targeted for control right now. Okay. And the reason is that in order to really eliminate them, you need to have safe water, safe sanitation facilities. And for that infrastructure to be in place, it's going to take a lot more than you can't just provide medicines, because then people will get reinfected. But you need to have that infrastructure in place. So in order to do that, there's going to need to be collaboration among different sectors internationally and in the country as well.
So poverty is definitely an issue also to address, I guess.
Absolutely. Yes.
Thank you so much, Ms. Sanchez, for joining us today.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
And that was Catherine Sanchez. She is Knowledge Manager of the End in Africa project with FHI 360. And that's our Africa Health Report for today. Back to you, Vincent.
Well, and thank you very much for joining us today, Lenore. Be sure to watch for Lenore Madu every Tuesday and Thursday for the latest health news in Africa, right here on Africa 54. Well, it's time now for a short break. Still to come on Africa 54, the 5-minute date, halal style. We'll be right back.
If you've just joined us, I'm Mariama Diallo, and here is a quick recap of today's headlines. In the Central African Republic, the UN criticizes peacekeeping efforts, MINUSCA, for failing to prevent violence that left 60 people dead in the past few months. In the Democratic Republic of Congo, the government is to vote on allowing President Joseph Kabila to run again in October, despite exceeding the term limit. In Madagascar, 37 defendants are on trial for lynching 2 Europeans and a local man wrongly accused of killing a young boy in 2013. In Tunisia, an agreement signed with France will serve as a guideline for heightened military cooperation to fight terrorism.
That's all for today. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.
Welcome back to Africa 54. Here's what's trending. The Martian took the top spot at the U.S. box office as it blasted off to a massive $55 million debut over the weekend, nearly surpassing another space-based adventure, Gravity, as the highest-grossing October debut in history. The Ridley Scott release was bolstered by rapturous reviews, with critics calling the picture among the director's best and heaping praise on Matt Damon's performance as an astronaut stranded on the red planet. Next up, a new food trend from Hollywood, stuffed with chicken, wrapped and formed by hand. This is a Japanese rice ball. For those tired of sushi or who don't like the idea of eating raw fish, the rice ball might be the ideal alternative. The rice ball is proving particularly popular in Los Angeles, with people looking for a tasty snack on the go. Rice balls are the latest food staple from Japan, popping up at Asian fast food eateries across the city. So why are these snacks becoming so popular? Rice balls pack multiple flavors and ingredients inside. They are more convenient and portable than sushi, and a nice alternative for people who can't stomach raw fish. And finally, speed dating goes halal in Muslim-majority Malaysia. A new matchmaking service in Kuala Lumpur is helping singles find a mate in a largely conservative society where courtship is frowned upon and marriages are often arranged. But unlike other dating services, women speed daters here must come with a chaperone. Halal Speed Dating's founders say most of their clients hope to find a spouse. A client can shortlist up to 3 possible partners, but can only negotiate marriage with one at a time in accordance with the Islamic rules. And that's what's trending today. Vincent?
Rather interesting there. And that's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. For more news, tune in to VOA's evening radio show, Africa News Tonight, at 1800 UTC. And in the mornings, to Daybreak Africa between 0300 and 0600 UTC, Monday through Friday. Thanks a lot for watching. From all of us in Washington, have a good night.
At stake is the basic human right of the woman and child.
This is a struggle against humanity, and we all need to join hands and do what we can do.
Women are not being heard, so we need to be doing a lot more.
A journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. I'm Sally Field, and I believe women are the best agents of change. These women from around the world are leading the way to challenge the status quo and motivate the next generation.
Let's move on and take a step in this journey.
Access to preventive care information and access to health care is a fundamental right.
It really makes me think about how I can contribute to the next generation.
These women bring us one step closer to realizing women's rights as human rights. Only on VOA.